Hey everyone, I'm Chris, and it's great to have you join us today at Middle School Digital Shorts, where this is part 3 of a series that we've been doing called In My Opinion. And let me start off by asking you a question. Does your school have cliques? You know, those groups of people who all seem to kind of gel and stick together, those groups of people who bond together based on the things that they have in common, you know, usually the groups that sit next to each other at lunch. You see, when I was in school, there was a Spanish clique, there was a sports clique, there was the computers clique, there was the drama kids clique, and even the smart kids clique. And while you might get along great and have a ton in common with the people in your clique, you might have a lot of strong opinions about the people in other cliques. You know, the ones that are different than you. See, when I was in middle school, there was one clique that I was totally a part of. And that was the group where we wanted to be the very best that no one ever was. And we knew that our true test was to collect them all. That's right, the Pokemon clique. We really thought we were the best thing around. We would compare cards, and honestly, if you weren't fortunate enough to have a deck or collection of your own, we thought you were pretty lame. And you absolutely had no place in our circle. And here's the truth. We all have opinions about other people, and oftentimes it's easy for us to form opinions or assume we know things to be true about people who are different than us. Sure, we don't know them all that well, but we definitely think we do. And what we think to be true of them becomes our opinion of who they are. I want you to think for a minute about the cliques in and around your school. You probably have assumptions or opinions about each and every one of them. And sure, you don't spend as much time with people that are different than you, people who aren't in your clique, but you've still made some pretty big assumptions about those people, haven't you? Maybe you've thought things like, those rich kids are, all the people on that sports team are, those smart kids are, man, these Pokemon collectors, they're, the drama kids, they're, and I bet right now, you're filling in each of these blanks with what you think you know about each one of these groups of people. We all do it. Even here at church, I bet you found yourself looking around and noticing cliques or groups of people and have thought things like, the kids who always come to church are, those students from that school, they always, or those kids that are in the younger grades are, and again, we form opinions about these people based on our assumptions. And just like that, our opinions become facts. And what's tricky is that those opinions or assumptions come from all kinds of places. Maybe you think something about a certain group of people because of a past experience. Maybe they bullied you, or hurt you, or embarrassed you, or just weren't all that kind to you. Maybe you saw them act a certain way or do a certain thing. Whatever it was, that experience, it helped shape that opinion. Or maybe for you, it really is just an assumption. You don't actually know the things you believe or think about the person or group of people are true. You just think it might be true. And for you, that assumption is enough to change your opinion. Or maybe for you, it's an opinion based in jealousy or insecurity. Those other people have something that you want or wish you had. And because you don't, you have negative feelings or opinions about them. Whatever the reason, when it comes to people who are different than us, people we don't really understand, we let our judgments and opinions affect how we view them. And that's a problem for a lot of reasons. I mean, for starters, our judgments aren't usually nice and kind thoughts. We aren't typically describing people we don't really know with words like awesome or cool or fun to be around. Not only does that mean we're judging or seeing them negatively, but it also means we probably aren't going to give them a chance in the future. We've already made up our minds, right? And we don't need to get to know them or learn anything else about them. In our minds, we already know who they are. But here's what I think we're missing. When we base our view on someone else, on one experience or one opinion or one assumption, then we aren't seeing the whole story. We aren't seeing the whole person. You know, there's a story in the Bible that I think can help us change the way we see other people. It's found in the book of John, which was written by one of Jesus' closest friends and followers named, you guessed it, John. Duh. John was one of 12 men who walked the closest with Jesus and learned from him during his ministry on earth. John wrote down what he actually saw, heard, and experienced as a follower of Jesus. And that's what we have to look at today. When we pick up our story, Jesus is teaching a group of people when several religious teachers interrupted him with a question. "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" Basically, these religious leaders came to Jesus with a question about a woman who was caught spending a lot of time behind closed doors with someone who wasn't her husband. The religious leaders knew the rules. They understood the law and what it said. Back then, when someone acted the way this woman did, they would be stoned. And that basically means people would literally throw stones at them until they died. Yikes. These religious leaders, they thought they knew exactly what Jesus was going to say about this woman. They were so sure that they interrupted his teaching to get the answer. And they just knew the answer was not only going to prove that they were right about who this woman was, but also show how much better they were than she was. Now, can we all admit that we, like the religious leaders, we have a tendency to think better of ourselves than we do about others? We tend to see what other people do or who they are much differently than the way we see ourselves. And because of that, we put space between us and them. We let our opinions and our judgments define who they are, and we slowly move ourselves away from them. And that's certainly what the religious leaders were doing with this woman. And I think that's probably what they thought Jesus would do too. But instead, Jesus did something I didn't think anybody expected. The religious leaders kept demanding an answer. So he stood up and said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. Jesus challenged these religious leaders to look inward at themselves and their own sin instead of judging others. Jesus told them that the one who hadn't sinned, who had never messed up or made a mistake or ever done anything wrong, was the only one who had the right to throw a stone at this woman. And as you can imagine, nobody there but Jesus fell into that category. While they were standing there, the religious leaders felt convicted and their argument was shut down completely. And instead of throwing stones like they'd planned, John wrote that after they heard what Jesus said, they slipped away one by one. Soon, it was only Jesus left standing with the woman. And here's what happened next. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." while the religious leaders had judged this woman on only one thing they knew about her, Jesus saw something else. Jesus saw this woman was so much more than one bad decision. She was so much more than just one opinion or judgment or experience. Jesus knew the whole story, and he loved her no matter what. Nobody in this story was really who everyone else thought they'd be. Everyone judged this woman as bad, but Jesus showed that she was worthy of forgiveness and a future. And everyone judged these religious leaders as good, but Jesus showed that they were no better than the woman that they came to stone. Because the truth is, we're all made in the image of God. And that alone makes us worthy of his love and forgiveness. That's the way Jesus saw other people, and he calls us to see them in the same way. Jesus wants us to remember that there's more to others than just our opinions of them. Going back to when I was an aspiring Poke Master in middle school, there was an incident when one day I got sick in gym class. I went to the nurse, and then I went back to get my backpack, and there was something odd. My bag felt lighter, and guess what? My binder with all my cards were missing. Someone stole it. And as I was frantically trying to look for it and I was freaking out, I decided to just stop. And you know what? Cry. Yeah, I do that sometimes. No shame. Anyways, someone who was a part of the drama clique stopped and tried to help me. And I, for one, thought drama kids were weirdos, but this one stopped and tried to help, and it actually meant a lot. And we turned out to actually be really good friends afterwards, so much so that I became one of those drama kids and had a lead role with my friend for the last production of our middle school year. You see, reducing someone to just one judgment or opinion causes you to miss so much. Those drama kids at your school, maybe they're really funny, but you have no idea because you've judged them as not. Those dancers in your lunchroom, they might be the nicest girls in your grade, but you just assume that they're mean, and that's because who they are in your eyes. Or those kids in your group who come to church all the time, maybe they're struggling with the same things you are, but you'll never know because they're perfect in your opinion. You might be missing out on so much about something by simply letting your opinions and judgments define them. So my challenge to you is to remember this. There's more to others than just our opinions of them. To help you remember this, I want you to try one of these two things this week. 1, worry about yourself. When you find yourself about to form an opinion or make a judgment about someone else, worry about yourself instead. Just as Jesus reminded those religious leaders, we've all got our own mistakes and missteps to worry about. So instead of focusing on someone else's behavior or interests or choices that you don't understand, focus on what you're doing and how you can better live out your life that God has for you. And 2, remove the judgment. Think about who in your world that you've judged or formed an opinion about and truly getting to know them. What if instead of judging them, what you think you know about them, you let the facts define them? What if you only focus on what you know to be true about them? Now, while you may not know much about the other person or group of people right away, you do know this for sure. They are children of God, made in his image, and they are deserving of his love. Start there. Then, instead of making assumptions, think of them with compassion, love, kindness, and grace, just like Jesus did. And remember, there's more to others than just our opinions of them. And as we wrap up this digital short, I want you to ask yourself this question and talk to your parents or to an adult that you look up to about it. What's one way I form opinions about people who are different than me? See you later.